Dr. Cooper. Welcome back.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be back.
It is so good to see your face again. I've been looking forward to this for the last 2 weeks. I'm so excited about it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was about to say, let's wait for other people to get on, but I'm like, you all knew it. You know, everyone knew it was 3 o'clock. If you're not on yet, it's your problem. You're going to miss the introduction. We run a tight ship here. Everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is a very special moment, a book club interview that we will be running today with Dr. Brittney Cooper, our esteemed and honored guest. She is a professor at Rutgers University. She's an author. She's an activist. She's a teacher. She's a, well, as I always describe you, a weather system.
I like it.
Your very own weather system. Yeah, she is, because force of nature just feels like such a cliche, and it doesn't actually take in the amount of power that I see you having in the world. And we're here to discuss this extraordinary book, which is called Eloquent Rage, A Black Feminist Discovers Her Superpower. There you are. This is the paperback edition, which is, may I take a moment to congratulate you, a New York Times bestseller.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Congratulations on that. And actually, I wasn't planning on starting with this question, but since I just said that it was a New York Times bestseller, I did want to touch on that. And I wanted to know what your reaction was when you found out that the book was a New York Times bestseller, and whether you had mixed feelings about that coming out of the George Floyd murder, like what I've heard other people who, other Black authors whose books are suddenly bestsellers saying it's a kind of an awkward feeling to have this great feeling of success, but it's come at this moment of tremendous cost. So I hadn't actually asked you about that yet. So I was wondering if you had any feelings about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was completely surprised. Like, I just had no idea this was happening. And one of my friends is the owner and founder of Uncle Bobby's Bookstore. And so he sent me a note because he sometimes gets the list. And he said, you know, congratulations. And I was like, what is this? Right. And so then I realized, so it was like lovely, because as a writer, you certainly want some of those big accolades. But I had kind of put to rest that the New York Times thing was not going to happen for me or for this book. So that part was lovely. But, you know, I definitely had that moment of thinking about, you know, what it means to be a writer whose job in this moment of racial unrest is always to attest to the horrors and the atrocities that Black people experience. And this, you know, perverse feeling of profiting from Black death. And very early in the, you know, as we learned more about what happened to George Floyd, I had tweeted about reflecting on the fact that my writing career in the sort of national mainstream really began in the aftermath of George Zimmerman being not convicted for the murder of Trayvon Martin. That's when I started writing for Salon, where I had a column for a couple of years. And, you know, so much of the work has been fueled by terrible things happening to Black people. And all I can sort of say about that is it is a bittersweet feeling. And what I hope to do is to kind of move with a level of integrity that as a creative and a writer, that my job, that there is a way to fight with one's pen, and that I'm also in a long tradition of Black freedom fighters who took to the page. The other thing that I try to do when we're not in a pandemic is to make sure that I don't just fight from the comfort of my home. So I fight in my classroom. I do go out to protest. I do try to, you know, to join organizing spaces to the extent that I'm helpful, so that this is not just someone sort of armchair quarterbacking the, you know, the revolution, so to speak. And so that's been my commitment. And I hope that moving with that level of integrity, and also making sure to give some money to movements, since those movements are also sustaining me and are the reason I have a job, because I work in disciplines, women's studies, Africana studies, that also come out of protest movements, right?
Right.
And so my whole career is really indebted to movements, to protest movements. And I try to keep that in mind, and I try to move in a way that respects that. So
that's a beautiful answer. Thank you. I appreciate you touching on that. And I said this to you in a text a couple weeks ago, but I wanted to say it to you publicly too. I just, before we even get into the very substantial content of this book and the content of your life's work, I feel as an artist, as a creator, as a woman, as a writer, I get frustrated when writing itself is not praised. And your book has been praised for a lot of things, including for the writing. But I just want to take a moment, writer to writer, to say, in addition to being an incredibly important book, I hate to only see this as being called an important book. It's also a beautiful book, sentence by sentence, moment by moment, story by story. And something in me as an artist just has to recognize that and say, I want to make sure that you get that credit. Not that you need it from me, but just that anybody who hasn't yet picked up Eloquent Rage, don't read it as a homework assignment. Read it as a work of art and as an extraordinary memoir, in addition to being something that is, by the way, extremely important. So I just wanted to
we did give the people homework, and as
we did.
You and I are homework people. So.
We are homework people. But. Did all of you do your homework? Those of you, oh, good. People are saying it is a beautiful book. Good. That looks like. If you want to kiss my ass and Brittney's ass, do your homework. We really, that is how you become a teacher's pet. So I wanted to begin by asking you if you would read a section that I think is so important and is sort of the heart and the spine of this entire book. It's where you have just been it's been brought to your attention. A Black student of yours had come to you and said that she was so impressed with the eloquent rage with which you spoke, and you were a little bit taken aback. Rage is a very loaded word for Black women, and then this is about you owning that word, and I think out of that grew this entire book. So if you don't mind reading, starting on page 4.
Yes. Okay. Shout out to my student Erica, who is a grown woman now and married with children, and she changed my life. So reading from page 4. Black women have the right to be mad as hell. We have been dreaming of freedom and carving out spaces for liberation since we arrived on these shores. There is no other group save Indigenous women that knows and understands more fully the soul of the American body politic than Black women whose reproductive and social labor have made the world what it is. This is not mere propaganda. Black women know what it means to love ourselves in a world that hates us. We know what it means to do a whole lot with very little, to quote unquote make $1 out of 15 cents, as it were. We know what it means to snatch dignity from the jaws of power and come out standing. We know what it means to face horrific violence and trauma from both our communities and our nation state and carry on anyway. But we also scream and cry and hurt and mourn and struggle. We get heartbroken. Our feelings get stepped on. Our dreams get crushed. We get angry and we express that anger. We know what it means to feel invisible. I know what it means to feel invisible, to be picked on, bullied, misunderstood, and dismissed. But when Erica called me out on my anger, it was clear that she saw me in a way that I wasn't particularly interested in being seen. She helped me to realize that my anger could be a powerful force for good. She had called my rage eloquent, clear, expressive, to the point. In her estimation, it had made me a good teacher, and it had inspired her and other students. Over and over again, Black girls have called me out and demanded that I get my shit together around my rage, around my work in the world, and around my feminism. Those Black girl call-outs, or homegirl interventions, as I call them in this book, have come from my grandmama, my mama, and my girls, and they have saved my life. America needs a homegirl intervention in the worst way. So in this book, I am doing what Black women do best. I'm calling out America on our bullshit about racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm using feminism to stage this homegirl intervention. I'm here for picket signs, pussy hats, as long as there are plenty of brown ones in the mix, and patchouli. My picket signs are as likely to say fuck the police as they are to say fuck the patriarchy. Black girl feminism is all the rage, and we need all the rage. Feminism can give us a common language for thinking about how sexism and racism and classism work together to fuck shit up for everybody.
Oh, so good. Thank you.
Yes.
I was so moved by that. I was so glad that you started with that. And there's another point in the book where you say, we live in a nation that does everything to induce our rage while simultaneously denying that we have the right to feel it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was also such an extraordinarily powerful thing. And I think it's a very powerful thing that white women need to hear, because the the line that you have to very carefully walk, if I'm understanding correctly, as a Black woman, is that every time you call bullshit, every time you do the homegirl intervention on the country, knowing it's an inherent violence, it's inherent injustice, suddenly now you're accused of being hateful, accused of being a terrorist, accused of being divisive, accused of being mean, accused of coming too hard. Like, if you soften your voice a little bit, you might be able to bring people along. Be patient. Change takes a long time. All of these aggressions that come largely a lot from white women saying,
Yeah.
like, ow, your rage frightens me, your rage scares me. And so I just wondered how you have, over the years, I mean, the book is a lot about this, but if you have any particular thing that you want to speak to on what it does to you to have to, as another activist I heard recently say, figure out how to express my rage without stepping on fragile white toes, and putting myself in even more danger as a result, right? I mean, and sometimes, often, expressing your rage is actually puts you in physical danger, or in danger of losing your job.
Yeah.
So if you could speak to that, I would be grateful for that. Thanks.
Yeah. One of the things I always try to say to white women about this is it's not like you don't have a point of reference, right? Because to the extent that white women have also integrated institutions and gone to war in like corporations and boardroom spaces with white men for power, white women know that moment when you call out sexism, when you begin to, sort of challenge the way that men mansplain and they condescend and they act like they know everything and they really don't. And then when you start to challenge it and you won't take it, then they're like, she's such a bitch, right? She's,
Right.
all of that stuff. She's a hard ass, right? She's a ball buster. White women have an experience of being called that because there's a gendered part to this thing where folks are like, anytime women across race and class express emotion, we are cast as irrational. And essentially what I'm arguing here is that experience is also magnified when you're Black. Because what whiteness is deeply uncomfortable with is Black rage and Black indignation, right? So there are two things that I would say about it. One is Black women are very deft at figuring out how to call white folks out. One of the things I say early in Eloquent Rage is that sometimes we're sassy, right? Sometimes there's this sort of double entendre where it looks like we're being funny, but we actually mean every word of it, right? And it allows us to say the thing we want to say while you think that what we're doing is making a joke.
Right.
That becomes a way that we can kind of be angry without triggering all of the consequences that come from that.
An unfortunately necessary art form, I would say.
I mean,
but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we pride ourselves on it.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why when you look at all those GIFs there, all these Black women expressing emotions, like the famous one from Viola Davis, How to Get Away with Murder, where she's grabbing the purse and, picking the purse up off the floor and leaving the room. There's a reason why people across race love that GIF, because the rage is apparent. The like dismissal and the, oh my God, all of the stuff is apparent there, even in the fact that she says absolutely nothing. It's just in a look. So there are also all these micro expressions. And look, Black women can be in a room with white people and be having two totally different conversations. So white people can be microaggressing, and you'll just see, Black women will just get each other's eye and be like, did you did you see that? And then we just like, head down, and then you come back up and your game face is back on. It happens so often. But the other thing I would say is, one of the things I'm thankful for at this point in my life, and that I have tenure in the institution where I work, and it's super rare in the history of Black folks to just have a job that by and large folks can't take from you. And I've said that if I have the freedom to do that, given the history of my people, I will not play nice. So I don't actually do the thing anymore where I go around trying to make white people comfortable. I just say the thing that I think. And so if I think that they're racist, or I think they've been, if I think they've been inappropriate, I just tell them, because I know that there are so many Black women who don't have the freedom to say it. Right. And I do. And I also try to say it more, because when we don't say it, we internalize it, we bring it home, and the stress and all that stuff shows up in our bodies. So I try to say it in as many places as I can, so that maybe that makes the road a little bit easier for Black women who may not have the same level of power within institutions. Yeah.
Right, which is almost all of them in almost every institution.
Correct.
As you were saying that, I was just thinking, what are the percentages? Like, what glancingly small percentage of Black women can say, "I can keep my job no matter what I say"?
Yeah.
Um, it's
Very,
extraordinary,
yeah.
and shouldn't be. I was wondering if I could get you to read another section.
Yep.
Okay, this is starting on page 20. And for those of you who are just tuning in and keep asking what the name of the book is, it's called Eloquent Rage. There's our lovely guest. I've doubled you up on the screen.
Yes.
And this is from page 20. I think this might be, in my mind, the best, simplest definition of feminism that I've ever read, or what feminism should be.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, a beautiful, exquisite piece of writing as well.
So yes, here we go. The thing I know today, after many cycles of homegirls, many more years of girl crushes, and a life of straight sexual activity, is that one can't truly be a feminist if you don't really love women. And loving women deeply and unapologetically is queer as fuck. It is erotic in the way that Audre Lorde talks about eroticism. It's an opening up, a healing, a seeing and being seen. Good sex is all these things too. My friendships with women have never been overtly sexual, but a good many of them have been what Bell Hooks in her book Communion, The Female Search for Love called romantic, in the soul inspiring way that someone being thoughtful about loving you and showing up for you is romantic. Often those connections have what Hooks called, quote, an erotic dimension that acts as an energetic force, enhancing and deepening ties. There is no room in my life for shallow or basic connections.
I love this so incredibly much. um, in my own life, I'm 50 now, it took me until shamefully recently to realize that everything that I had ever been looking for in men, I could only find in women. And I don't mean that from a sexual standpoint, although I have had a beautiful relationship with a woman. I mean, I wanted, because we're taught to, I wanted to have one man show up and click and fill in all of these pieces of me that I now recognize can only be filled in by a community of women, not just one woman, but a group of women, a tribe of women. So I was so moved by that idea, and also so moved by the idea of female friendship as being romantic in that way of thinking about each other, looking out for each other. And I was very touched reading this as a white feminist, because I know that white women have failed for centuries at loving Black women in the way that you described, meaning being thoughtful about showing up for you, caring. One thing that I noticed, that I got to call everybody out on a little bit. When you posted after you had your last session, when we did the Share the Mic Now video, and the video was posted, a lot of white women in the comments were saying that they wished they had Black female friends, and they were asking questions like, "How do I get a Black friend?" And I'm not posing that question to you. I'm just saying that the question was coming up. How do I get a Black friend? And one woman said, will Black women ever forgive us for all that we have done? And my feeling, I want to let you answer it, but I wanted to say, this isn't about white women. This isn't about you getting another thing you want, right? When you pose the question, how can I have a Black friend? How can I get more Black friends? All I hear you saying is, I haven't yet been given enough by my privilege, and now I want to collect some of this as well. It's putting you at the center of your want and your need. And similarly, what I know about forgiveness, and I know about this from 12-step rooms, I know about this from making amends, that first apologize, but more importantly, with every apology comes a change, or else it's just an empty thing. So again, before you go to the Black community and say, I feel really bad about everything we did, will you forgive me? Don't ask Black people for more stuff. Don't ask Black people for more stuff. Just find out how you can serve. So that would be and how you can be thoughtful about showing up in real and helpful ways. So now I'm going to let you answer that.
Yeah.
And However you wish, obviously.
Yeah, look, I mean, let me be honest and say the first thought I had when you said, "Will y'all ever forgive us?" is no. But okay, so, and I know that that's a hard answer, but let me say this other thing. Part of the thing I was trying to speak to was literally that impulse in women where they're like, I'm a guy's girl. Women are too catty, right? And I've seen that across racial categories, right? That women internalize this thing about how other women are untrustworthy, and then they want all of this validation from men. Black women certainly do that, and it means that that's why we're afraid of feminism, because we think that it lessens our access to patriarchy, and that's a thing that just has to be critiqued across the board. I'm
Right.
tired of a feminism where folks are like, I care about women, but when you get up close, you find out that they're actually known for stabbing other women in the back, being a climber on the backs of women, not being supportive and being in solidarity. So that's
Right.
what that's about. But the other part of it about, like, how do white women and Black women figure this thing out? Here's the thing I want to say. Like, the first step to forgiveness is you've got to stop wounding us. You don't just have to say you're sorry. You have to actually stop doing shit that hurts our feelings, that is, so we got to stop with the passive aggressiveness. We got to stop with the white girl tears. You got to stop in institutions with relying on, when you see problematic things happening, you let the Black girl take the heat, as she says, racially wrong or wrong about gender. And you're like, well, she's so strong and articulate and she can handle it. And I didn't know what to say. Even if all you say is, I think she's right, and our question is, how are we going to support her? That helps, right? So before we are looking for friendship, we are looking for white women's allyship. Here's the hardest place, though, that white women are going to have to struggle, because, see, what white women want often is they want to sort of roll up and have these friends, they want to roll into Black women friendships, and you want all of this. You want the sassiness. You want all of the, you're like, I want the real authentic Black girl experience. It's like when I'm in the club. I mean, when I used to go to the club many years ago, and white girls would always be rolling up, like trying to dance on me and stuff, and talking about, show us the latest dances. And it's like, I don't know you. And if you knew me, you know that I don't dance in the club like that. So there's that.
Right.
Right. But also, so the real challenge for white women, the biggest work we need you to do is what y'all gonna do about white men. Like, white men do a bunch of terrible stuff. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of money, but they don't necessarily have a lot of social consciousness about what needs to change. White women live in the belly of the beast. Y'all live with Trump voters.
Yep.
The way you can be a friend to Black women is literally by trying to move the needle on some of that stuff. And it's super hard talking to other white women, talking to white men. And then when we understand you to be a person who sees in your life that there's a way you can be an interloper because of the spaces you have access to, then part of what then happens is that we start to go, okay, like, we need to pay that chick some attention. Like, she might be on something different. And as we start to build trust, the thing I'm saying to you is, just like every other relationship, then our desire to be in relationship with you comes, right? Because we start to see in your actions how you move about in the world that you're really committed to this work. Last, a lot of the friendships you will build will be up close. It will not be these kind of big political things. Like, I would argue, 3 or 4 white girls that I'm friends with, that I like to kiki with about stuff, that I text with and talk to. And at least 2 of those friends, we rarely talk about politics, right? We just are friends. We have shared experiences. That's the thing that we talk about, their kids, our childhood, whatever it is. And so every friendship doesn't have to be about you being anti-racist out in the public. Sometimes it can just be about, you like this outfit this woman wore, and you gave her a compliment on it, and y'all bonded over the fact that y'all like the same kind of shoes, or whatever. And that can then be the jumping off point for you to work on some of this stuff. You got to see us as human beings and not as symbols of the thing you're trying to achieve, right?
Right. Yeah. I have a friend who last week was just trying to give herself a Black woman who was trying to give herself some self-care and some love, and went to a spa, sitting in a hot tub, and a white woman came and sat in the hot tub and just looked at her and said, "I'm so sorry for everything that's going on." you know, and I was like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
You
like,
know, look, and
get to work, let
let
her
me
have
say
her
this
hot
stuff.
tub.
See that kind of stuff. That all depends on the execution, right? Because it
Right.
wouldn't bother me if it's long. That actually wouldn't bother me. Sometimes I like the acknowledgement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, like this is a little crazy. The issue becomes when they then want more engagement, like they want to then have a conversation, right?
Right.
But another thing you could do is be like, you know, rather than trying to do that kind of connection. I'm not saying everything is about capitalism, but you could go up to the spa desk and say, hey, I saw this Black woman, you know, who is doing this thing at this time. Can I pay for one of her services, her pedicure or her whatever? And, you know, and then when she leaves, it's just been done. You
Right.
cared for her.
Right.
You lifted a burden. And it wasn't about your need for absolution, but literally about like a way that you could just offer care. Sometimes you can offer care simply by I'm gonna hold the door open for you and not let it slam in your face when I see you coming, which happens to Black people far more than you know. That there are these little common courtesies that white people extend to each other that they often don't extend to us. And so just being mindful as you're moving through public space. I was telling my dad one time, you know, I was like, sometimes white people just move through public space like they own it. Like I can literally be out in the world and like white people often bump into my body and never say excuse me. And I am like, I am a big old Black girl. You have to see me. I'm like, you know? And so how is it that you just can, you know, bump into me and keep going with no sense, right? So even just that sort of thing where you are not out in the world acting like, I mean, white people literally have a physical sensibility about them sometimes if you observe, where they know that they run shit. And they are like, cars will move out of the way for me. I will jaywalk here and nobody is going to hit me. Whereas Black people are super like, I'm not talking about teenagers because they're all animals, right? I'm not talking about anytime I say this, white people be like, I saw some Black teenagers on the train and they were being rude because that's teenagers. But I'm saying generally speaking,
Yeah.
you will sort of see this thing, right? And Black people are like super solicitous and they're like, very like, oh, excuse me, ma'am, you know, let me get out of the way, let me move. We're very conscious of our personal space. White people are not conscious.
Right.
The only people who are sometimes, white women are more conscious because they're worried about male violence. But if there's no immediate fear of that, so when I say these micro levels of things, I'm literally talking like, think about who you are in the world every day as you move through. Because what white people sometimes don't understand is that Black people are literally thinking about that kind of stuff. Like,
every minute for even just for from a question of pure safety. You know, how am I going to be received in this space? How am I going to be received in this space? And there's something that you wrote in the book that I thought was so extraordinary. Let me see if I can find it in my notes. It was about, here it goes. This is, I think, exactly what you're speaking to right now. White privilege works by making the advantaged white people have, white privilege, let me try again. White privilege works by making the advantages that white people have invisible, while making the supposedly poor choices of people of color hypervisible. This educated me a lot. That sentence and everything that you wrote in that section about how your white privilege is so deeply, it's in your DNA, it's in your marrow, that you can't even see how you have it. This whole sense of the way you just spoke about the way white people take up public space, it's why wouldn't I own it? You know, like doesn't even, you know, I own it all. I own this park bench.
I'm a taxpayer, right?
Yeah, I own this sidewalk. I own like your lawn if I want to walk on it. Like this whole sense of it's been a painful education for me to see that the reason it took me so long to come to this understanding is because the silence of my privilege, and not having grown up wealthy, not having grown up with what I would have thought once in my life constituted privilege, country clubs and horses, right? Not having grown up with that made me think that I had earned everything that I had created in the world, rather than understanding this centuries long, one generation after another of here's another advantage we're going to give you. Here's another, hey, guess what? You get to move to this neighborhood. Hey, guess what? You get a loan on your house. Hey, guess what? You get to inherit wealth. Hey, guess what? You get to have property. You get to apply for a union job. You know, all of this stuff that built up invisibly into my people's eyes over the centuries, where we just get to sit back and congratulate ourselves on how well we've done. So I thank you for pointing that out. And okay, I want to ask you, sorry, did you want to say something about that?
The quickest thing I want to say about that is, and sometimes the undoing of that privilege, because it is, your life is set up so that you don't have to see it, is that you have to learn to trust Black people begin to tell you about their ends. And that is often hard for white folks, because Black people have such a different read of environment sometimes. And so white people's immediate defensiveness, it's like if I go into a store and I can tell that a person is being racist, sometimes even when they don't say anything. And, you know, there's a way the face gets tight or the body gets, you know, whatever. And I'll, you know, if I say that to a white person, they're like, oh no, they're just uptight. They're just a jerk. Right. You know, and Black people are like, no, they weren't that to you. They were that to me because they're racist. And so you literally have to begin to trust that the things Black women tell you, that part of how whiteness works as well is by hiding those things from view. You're not supposed to see you're supposed to buy into the idea that you earned it all. And so if there's literally something in your experience that makes it so that you can't understand, well, the only way you build empathy is by trusting that there are other groups of people with other perspectives that you wouldn't have. And we get that when we're like, I want to go explore another culture, right? Then we're like, oh, well, they would see things differently. But for Black people, we're like, they just have grievances. And it's, you know, we can't. So then you don't even trust Black people's account of their own experience, because you think that they're trying to take something from you, right? And so, so that's also the work that white people have to do, is to figure out, what does it look like to actually listen, hear, and believe, even when nothing about my experience would suggest that that is true, right?
Thank you. I would also add, listen to a variety of Black voices. Black experience is not monolithic. Black opinions are not monolithic. You know, don't like read one book and be like, I understand Black people.
Got it. Now.
Hey, you guys, guess what I'm an expert on? I want to speak to you about something that I saw many times in your book. And again, for people who are just jumping on, I keep seeing people ask the title. I'm going to just keep repeating it. It's Eloquent Rage. If you haven't read it yet, read it for a lot of reasons. There's a theme that I felt continuously showing up in your book, which was a distinction between a frustration, I guess maybe I could say, about how we cannot have individualistic remedies for institutional and structural disease. And it came up a number of times in your book. And it also came up when you were doing the Instagram Live, when you did the takeover of my account 2 weeks ago. And a whole bunch of people were throwing, what's your Venmo? What's your Venmo? Everybody wanted to know your Venmo because, you know, the nice, earnest white ladies on my page have been doing their homework, and they've been taught, you know, pay Black women for their labor. You know, we're getting so much out of this conversation. We want to Venmo you, you want to Venmo you. And you were like, I have a job. You're like, I don't need you to gin up my Venmo account. And you said, what I want is reparations for Black people. You said, I don't want white people to feel like they have to individually gin up my bank account. That's an individual solution to a collective problem. We want systemic levels of reform. So what I wanted to ask you about in that, and you mentioned that many times in the book, you also talk about individual blame being an unfair thing when there's systemic violence against Black people as a whole, and then single Black mothers are blamed. You know, individual blame, individual attempts. It reminds me too of Jeffrey Canada, who's a educational reformist who's always expressed his frustration at the model that we've had thus far, which is let's take the 2 or 3 super talented Black kids out of the disastrous school and send them to Harvard and then feel good about ourselves, right? Like as if we can save one individual and that's going to change a culture. You know, obviously the entire culture has to be changed. My question is, while we're waiting for that, while we're waiting for a better government, and not waiting passively, but while we're working toward a better government, while we're working toward this, is it, you know, what is the role of the individual in terms of our work on a one-to-one level? And what is your vision for the systemic transformations that need to occur?
Yeah, that's a big question.
No
Um,
pressure.
Yeah, look, part of the thing is about recognizing sometimes I think individuals don't think that they have much power, but think about the places in your life, the institutions that we interact with daily where you can will power. So if you're a parent, a friend, from my hometown just sent me a letter that the principal of the school sent out to the school, to the parents and the students for next year with a terrible account of race, right? And so when that happens in the school that you're at, are you going to wait on the Black parents to get outraged? Or even if there are no Black parents, which is also interesting, will you still say something? Will you reply and say, actually, I disagree with this. Actually, I want to call a meeting. Actually, I think here at the PTA, we should think about how we participate in privilege. You might begin to ask yourself, what is the condition of students of color that your kids go to school with, and how are they dealing, right? So when I say institutional change, I literally don't just mean that the government has to change. I mean, at your job, if you work, if you're on corporate boards or you sit on the board of a community organization, has that community organization put out a statement? Has it thought about the way that it might be participating or the way in which it can be an ally? Are you using that smaller lever of power to just advance the conversation, change policy? Because none of us lives our life outside of an institutional context, right?
Right.
Some of the most foolishness that goes on in neighborhoods happens in the HOA meeting. Are you calling out ridiculousness that's happening in the HOA meeting, right?
Right.
So I'm asking people to think about what are the institutions you move around in an everyday setting. Where is whiteness allowed to proceed as though that is the thing that is happening? And I don't mean that you have to intervene in every facet of your life, but I mean pick a place. It could be the PTA or the HOA. If you're really feeling like you got the juice, go for all of it. But you could just decide that you're going to be an advocate in one place. It allows you to practice. It allows you to build relationships. The stakes matter, but they are not as intimidating because those are institutions that you know and are a part of. So that's that part. When I think broadly, I always think about how Black women vote, right? In 2017, 2018, we managed to flip the House of Representatives. Everybody was like, trust Black women. Black women have done this. And there were all these think pieces about how Black
Right.
women
I remember
voters
that.
came out
Thank you,
and
Black
saved the
women.
day,
Thank you,
right?
Black women. We love you now.
Right. We're off that now. Like everybody's like, whatever. But, but for a moment, we had a shining moment. And so what are the kinds of things that Black women support when they actually get a political voice, right? Typically they vote from somewhere between liberal to progressive, right? They are voting for money for public schools. They're voting for better housing policy. They're voting for school lunch programs. They typically are voting for candidates that care less about war and about militarism, right? They're voting for a strong social safety net. So those are like really basic kinds of things. I'll give you like a community example. I'm sad during the pandemic because they just opened a new Y in my neighborhood, and it has like one of those community splash things that the kids can go to in the summer. And they have one in my hometown, and I'd gone with my mom a couple summers ago, and we walked up. All the kids splashing in the pool were Black kids in the community splash. There were no white kids there, and Black people are only like 40% of the population in this place. So I said to my mama, as we were standing there, I said, Mom, this is why you have to have strong public accommodations, because you see who's using this. I was like, it's a public park, but it's being used because white kids have access to private pools at the neighbor's house, if not their own. Black people, when they vote in local, state, and national elections, are literally electing the kinds of candidates that are going to make sure that there's a splash pool for kids in the summertime, because they know what kids need those kinds of public kind of spaces, right? It's not white kids who need them. But the thing about it is, if white kids came out there, then it's all there and fun for everyone. So that is my vision. My vision is for a robust public sphere, robust public institutions. It is for for well-funded schools, for us to have a different model of how we fund schools, because we fund them through property taxes, which automatically means they're going to be underfunded in poor neighborhoods. For us to, defund police and significantly decrease the kind of money that we give to the military, and put that into really having a social safety net that supports the elderly, that supports folks with disabilities, right? We gotta be talking about having a universal basic income in this country, right? because everyone needs a base level of like, even if I can't get the job I want, I want to be able to take care of my kids, put a roof over our heads, have some food, right?
Right.
So I'm saying to you that so much of my vision for how the world works is literally just looking at what kinds of things do Black women care about when you look at them across history. And Black women have this really distinct sense that if our public institutions are robust, then everyone does better, right?
Right.
And then we don't need the sort of, and look, that turns into other forms of high level policy. Like I spend a lot of time being down in the trenches thinking about like corporate privatization, mostly because I understand that every time you give corporate tax breaks or Amazon gets more power or whatever, that all of that stuff is the erosion of public life. And that is the thing that scares me more than anything, is we can't have a healthy democracy if we have an erosion of public life. So
I'm just writing down erosion of public life. Because I feel like when I think about the white men in my life, their sacred church is privatization.
Yes.
That is the temple at which they worship. Unless they have really gotten some progressive politics into them somehow, nothing soothes them, calms them, reassures them more than the idea of this would be better if it was done privately. The schools would be better if they were done privately. This post office would be better if it was privatized.
You are despite marching down my street, lady. You got it.
And they're exactly correct about that it would be a lot better for them.
For them. That's right. That prepositional phrase is the thing. Right? For them. It's that. Listen. Oh my goodness. I haven't ever figured out in my writing how to write about this.
Oh, you froze there for a minute.
I'm sorry. Someone
there you are. Okay. How dare they?
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry about that. But I'm not figuring out how to write about this because it seems so policy wonky, right? Like, how do you talk about privatization in public life? Because I feel really clear that that like the way that white men exhale when like they're like, and then we privatize it, it'll be more efficient, But some of that is really rooted in the idea, like, I always just do this exercise with my students. I say, when I say the term welfare, what do you see? And they always go, oh yeah, we see like a Black woman, with a lot of kids, and she's poor, and she won't work, she's lazy, and she's trying to get. So we've tethered the idea of the public to a Black female body, and based on the female body that we don't trust. And based on that, that's why all of these folks go around the world defunding like public institutions in the U.S. That's how they can do it, because they're just like, whenever you say public to white people, they're like, I'm not going down to the welfare office with, I'm not going to that public pool with all those Black, unsanitary Black children. But you see how you never have to say race. All you have to say is public. And it's attached.
Meanwhile, could I have my farm subsidy, please?
Talk about it. All of it. Absolutely. Okay. You got it.
Exactly. And my mortgage. My mortgage deduction for my second home.
Yeah, that's what
could I have that subsidy? This brings me back to something that I also love. Hang on. I'm looking through all my homework because I did my homework. Okay, there's something that you said. Okay, in the book, and again, for those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking about Eloquent Rage with Dr. Brittney Cooper. Read it. You say here in the first chapter, if you say fuck the patriarchy, but you don't ride for other women, then it might be more true that the patriarchy has fucked you. I love that. And I think, and that ties right into something that you said on the Instagram live takeover 2 weeks ago. In your commentary, you said, you can't invest in a violent project and not expect it to come back to you. What else you got, this is you talking to white women about their privilege. What else you got for your white privilege is Donald Trump. So when I just said, I do have a point here, I'm going to tie it together. When I said people like my dad, a lot of white men, like how much they love and relax into this idea of privatization because it makes them feel safe. The reality is it's fucking them too. The social science on this is absolutely intact. The larger the gap between wealthy and poor in any society, the shorter the lifespan of every single person in that society.
Yeah.
So if you, and this is just absolutely true. So as we've seen people's lifespans going down in the United States for the first time at the same time that we're seeing that massive gap between rich and poor, and it's not just poor Black people whose
Oh,
lifespans are
what?
going to be shortened. It's rich white people.
Yep.
I think there's spiritual reason for that. I think there's political reasons for that. But basically, what I heard you saying was, even if you think that patriarchy is benefiting you, it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't even benefiting the people who it looks like it's benefiting. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's essentially the argument of Jonathan Metzl's great book, Dying of Whiteness, right? That white people are literally, investing in a system that kills them. So for poor white people, that a lot of that research is rooted in like the places where they live,
Right.
that didn't participate in Medicaid expansion means that for working class white folks, then they don't have access, but but many of them are Trump voters. So there's that. But I want to say something more fundamental. I think there's a point that relates to white men and white people generally, and then a point that relates to white women. So white people and white men generally, the thing about investing in that system is that capitalism is what kills us, right? And that it is this continual churn of work. So anytime I'm in a room and I ask an audience, whatever the composition of that audience, who in here is exhausted, everybody's hand goes up.
Right.
Because all of us are working harder than we've ever worked for less pay. And white men are like, we think that white people are passively sitting around experiencing white privilege. And that's not true. White people are working themselves to the bone to maintain this kind of power, right? So when we get a conservative government in and they say to corporations that basically all of the, we've opened the gates, you can do what you want, then white men start working harder because it's a money grab. They're stacking paper, right? Because they're like, we're trying to short generational wealth. Now their family ties are eroding. Their wives are, doing, working all the time and getting no breaks from the children, all of that kind of stuff. And white men are often deeply unhappy, right? They don't have any connection to their soul or their spirit or their calling. They've bought into the idea that building wealth is building power. They're not wrong. And that they can do that to the exclusion of everything else. That's the lie that whiteness sells us, that money is power and it is God and it is the thing to work towards, right? The thing for white women, and one of the things I was getting at when I talked on your IG Live a couple weeks ago is, I came to that in part when I was thinking about Me Too. I was thinking about Me Too and I was thinking about the election of Donald Trump, a man who admitted on tape to sexually assaulting women. And then a year later, we had this, explosion of the Me Too movement, and we learned that all of these rich, powerful white women had still had their careers limited, and they had been terrorized, and they had been raped and violated and sexually harassed by powerful white men. And I thought, and some people have this critique of Me Too because they said, well, all it's doing is focusing on powerful white women. And that's an important intersectional perspective, right? That, we should be thinking about if powerful white women are getting this, then what the hell is happening to domestic workers of color, for instance?
Right.
But the thing that I thought to myself was, but if this is like, if money and power and proximity to white men doesn't protect rich and quote unquote beautiful white women, then why are any of us invested in patriarchy, right? If you can be one of the most famous, well-connected white women in the world, and your whole career can be hobbled because of a white man who always has more power than you says that you must be sexually sort of beholden to him or else, that is patriarchy at its finest. Like, that's how it works. It's telling us there's no amount of money, power, or proximity to whiteness that will protect you. And that is the most intimate form of violation. And so why are you so worried about proximity to that stuff if all it does is make you, so now you're just getting raped by more powerful men, right? I mean, how is that?
Wow.
How is that the win, right?
Right.
And so so that is the thing that I've been trying to say to white women is, what is the thing that you're actually getting from, because white women, the few that I talked to, some, old high school classmates and stuff talk to me about being Trump voters in 2016 or whatever. and they would be talking about like how their husbands were belligerent and acted like Trump. And I was like, yeah, I was like, a lot of y'all live in the house with Donald Trump. You know, men who can't be reasoned with, think they're right. You know, it's always bluster. Your whole job in life is to like feed their ego, big them up. You know, I'm like, white women.
King babies is what we call it. Yeah,
What you
king
call it?
babies. King babies.
Oh, see,
The king baby.
wow,
Yep.
yep. And it's like it's like, but isn't that exhausting? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and what would happen if we? This is the, you know, even though a lot of my Black feminist sistren have deep resentment toward white women, I share much of their resentment and are largely not interested in talking to white women about any of this. The thing that I know though is that there's a Black corollary to that. Like, Black women have our version of that. Our dudes just don't have as much power, but they have as much ego, in part because they want the power that white men have. And so it's like, I see that as like a potential point of solidarity between us, is that,
Right.
you know, is that we are all dealing with men who have such a limited vision of what the world can be. And we are the women who live up close to them. And we see all of the perils of that. We see the potential for sexual violation. We are all exhausted because everybody's trying to raise these wonderkin children that are geniuses by age 5, in part, you know, and so all parents are internalizing that idea that your kid needs to read by age 2, that they need to blow things out of the water in kindergarten, or else they're going to be left behind. All of that stuff is whiteness and capitalism. And I see Black parents laboring under the burden of that. White parents are laboring under the burden of that. And if we got to get to the table sometime, we would actually have the basis for some real political solidarity about why we're all so stressed out.
Right.
What it means to live up close to these cisgender heterosexual dudes who really are deeply invested across race and class and just not getting it, right?
Right.
So I think that, well, just to say, there's a lot of stuff that Black and white women can talk about. When Black women could trust, for instance, that white women can be less invested in the cookies that whiteness hands out, then we can really sit and talk about all of the emotional labor we do to support these dudes that has us all just like, you know, I need a drink of water, something stronger, you know, because this is super hard, right?
Right.
And I imagine a world where I would like to be able to have those kinds of conversations, you know, the vulnerability and intimacy of those conversations, because a politics grows out of that.
Right.
And sometimes, unfortunately, what I'm saying is that whiteness disrupts those spaces, and so right when you could get down to the real work, then somebody say something inappropriate, you know. Yeah.
Either wants to hand out cookies or wants to get them. or wants some. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I was really touched in the personal parts of your book, what I would call the memoir. The book is I think it's sort of a memoir. It's sort of a screed. It's sort of a it's sort of a sermon. It's sort of a, you know, yeah, I would call it a sermon more. You know, it's like, you know, I do, you know, you talk about the books in your life that are sacred texts, and when I read this, I felt like, yeah, this has the feeling of sacred text. You know, but the memoirist aspects of it, when you spoke about your father, there was something that you pointed out that I had never realized before, and it broke my heart open. It broke my mind open and my heart open. And you spoke about your father joining the military, and you spoke about the way that the military in the United States, which is of course the most highly militaristic culture that has ever lived in the history of the planet, the military has become a place where Black men can go and experience power, but it comes at this tremendous cost, where the way that they can experience, I wouldn't even say power, but a lessening of powerlessness, you know, is through becoming an agent of violence. And by signing up for that violence, you then get to be seen as it's how you earn your manhood, it's how you earn your honor, it's how you earn the dignity that's been lost to you in the general culture. I had never thought about that before. And there's a line that you have about Vietnam, let's see if I can find it, where you said something like, it appears that I cannot find it, but it was something like that your father had the privilege of was given this, or the men of your father's generation were given this privilege of going and raining down violence on another culture, and through that being allowed access into some hierarchy in American culture that they couldn't get any other way.
Yeah.
That just killed me, and then brought that violence, the PTSD, back home into their families and into their communities, and that was the price they paid for that traditional sense of male honor. I wondered if you have another vision for how honor seems to be very important to men. Like, how do we get them to have it in some way that doesn't involve raining down violence, both on the massive scale, and a war, and on the intimate scale within the home?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well,
Not that it's your job to answer
no,
that,
but no,
but I
but
just
we all
wonder.
live, yeah, we all live with the intimate consequences of that. I hadn't actually made the military connection until I was writing, as I was writing through the stories of the men who shaped my life, whether in their presence or their absence. I realized as I was writing through, I was like, oh God, it's all a military connection, right?
Right.
I just hadn't realized that. But I mean, look, I'm deeply anti-military, and part of what I've, when I've had young men in my family who are like, I'm going to go to the military, I immediately start to say to them, well, what is the thing you want to be, right? And let's dream about how you can get there. Because what I know is that most of them are not like, I want to be a warrior. They are like, I don't see another pathway to my dreams.
Right.
And the other thing I think about this is really the more basic point, and it's like a line from Audre Lorde in her book Sister Outsider. She says, I want my son to know, or teach my son that I do not exist to do his feeling for him.
Mm.
And
Oh.
yeah, I mean, it's just, every time
Oh.
the line,
Oh my God. Oh
and
my God. I'm just thinking of male relatives of mine who I've seen literally look at their wives and say, what do I think about that? Or have I, was I upset about that? Did I hurt? Like, literally checking and asking, can you tell me what I felt? Anyway, sorry, I interrupted, but I
no.
really felt that one. Go ahead.
Yeah, that thing, right? And so what does it mean that if we begin to nurture the emotional vocabulary of young boys and men when they are young people? Use your words. What are you feeling? What are your coping mechanisms? Then they have a critique of power, then the seductions of power, and the moments when they feel powerless. They don't then need to go to the military to work it out, right? They
Right.
recognize other ways that they can have structure. And so it's all this sort of feminist work about reimagining masculinity, where what we are really trying to build is a world where men understand masculinity in terms of the kind of people they want to be rather than the kind of men they want to be. Well, who do you want to
Right.
show up in the world as? You want to show up as
Right.
strong, as a leader, as caring. It's basic, but we still do this thing in our society. We're getting better, but where Black communities still struggle with this because we are worried about what it means if our men aren't strong. And so
Right.
still yell at little boy babies when they cry, like, stop all that crying, right? We're still doing that. And it's rooted in our own trauma and our own sense of like, can you raise Black boys with a level of gentleness and kindness and then them still thrive in the world, right? Will that gentleness or kindness be respected? And so we start cultivating hardness in our boys. And a lot of what that hardness then does in schools is they become targets. They're policed and criminalized. And then by the time that they're ready to make their mark on the world, like structurally, where does a soft Black boy go? Like, if he wants to be a poet or an artist, well, how does he get there, right? If he's from a working class place and he can't go to an elite college and there's no art school and he's grown up in a world where there aren't art programs. I mean, look, we already know what one version of that. That's how hip hop was created. I mean, that's how
Right.
it
Right.
comes to me,
Right.
right? But
Right.
I
Right.
mean, literally, like I teach hip hop, it's one of my areas of expertise or whatever. And so I teach hip hop courses, and we always talk about like when Black kids in the 80s are doing the beatboxing thing with their hands, it's because they don't have access to percussion instruments. So they make them, they become the instrument, right? Or, you think about DJing and, it's Black kids, turning the turntable into an instrument because they don't have art instruments in schools beginning in the late 70s with the defunding of public institutions, right? To loop back. So
because it'd be better to privatize.
correct. And so that's the thing that moves out of school,
right.
arts education. And
right.
what doesn't ever move out is the need for creativity and self-expression. And so part of what we know is that Black boys have spent the better part of 40 years using hip hop as their primary mode to say, we feel pain, we feel rage, we feel, and
right.
we want to be heard and we want to be listened to. And so I think that that's a really important space to think about in this era. What are Black boys trying to tell us about what matters to them, right?
Yeah.
So all that to say that the day-to-day thing that I think we can do to help men not show up and be violent is to affirm their brilliance and to also demand that they learn a deep and abiding emotional vocabulary. Because it's the thing that women do with each other. We're social. I mean, this is what we're doing. We're talking to each other. Well, how did you feel about that? And what did you think
right.
about that? And, little girls are doing it at the sleepover and women are still doing it at the sleepover, right? Like, and tell me your thoughts about that, because I thought this thing, and did you read this book? Because see how they said that thing? And dudes are like, we're playing video games. We're playing basketball. And, they don't have an emotional vocabulary to process. And that stuff is going to come out, it comes out in some way. And
it comes out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It comes out and it harms everybody, even the perpetrators. I want to get to some of audience questions. Yesterday, I said that we were going to be talking, and I asked people if they had questions, and I wrote down a couple questions that I thought were interesting that came from the people who've been reading your book for the last 2 weeks, and also from your conversation that you had. One of them is, and I've seen this question before, I've seen this confusion. There's, an eagerness, there's a sincerity in a lot of white women to show up, especially at this moment, which does feel like a historic moment. I also want to talk to you about how it feels to you, how you're seeing it. And some of them are expressing confusion. They're so afraid of doing something wrong. They're expressing confusion because they feel like they're getting two messages. And one message is, white women, come for your people. You need to pick up, don't make Black people solve problems that Black people didn't create. We need you to start teaching anti-racist stuff. We need you to be intervening. We need you to do this work now. It's like, just from sheer demographic numbers, we need white people involved in this fight or it's never going to work, because that's the definition of a minority. We don't have enough. We need you too, right? And then the other voice saying, don't, this is not your space. Don't step into this space. Don't speak about stuff that you don't know enough about. You can do harm. And so I can feel that there's a tremulousness and in a lot of these women who are like, I'm ready to be activated. Is it okay if I join this battle? How can I join this battle in a way that I was about to say I see perfectionism in it too, which is I'm learning a white supremacist value, perfectionism and urgency. My friend Ebony Janice Morris talked about this that white urgency. Like, I just found out about this 2 weeks ago. I just found out this month that there's racism and now I need to do it right and I want to fix it, So, how do you both say, I'm even thinking about this as I'm speaking in this space, how do I say to my followers both, keep up the urgency and slow your roll? This is a marathon, not a sprint. We need you here 6 months from now. We need you here 2 years from now. How would you answer that question about the appropriate role?
Yeah. I think a couple of things. One is, I think that there is a contradiction. And sometimes when I'm with Black audiences, I will say this to them. I'm like, half the time we're yelling, why don't y'all speak up? And then when white people speak up, we're like, shut up and sit down. Like, we kind of, and Black people are like, yeah, we kind of do that, right? Because look, some of this is that we're angry and we don't trust white allies, because why would we? But also, we don't always want to be out there on our own. And so what I would say to y'all is that this is a malleable thing. It is growing. We are all learning what does it mean to show up for each other. But the one compass that I tell white people to use all the time is, We don't typically need you to show up in Black spaces and speak to our experiences. We're
Oh
often,
God,
you know,
no.
or like, you know, when Black people are like, we got this, right? We typically need you to show up in white spaces where things are not being checked and then say something, right? So, you know, it's about, you know, if the, you know, a lot of times, for instance, in a college classroom, a teacher, if a kid says something problematic, not even racially problematic, rather than the teacher dealing with that kid, they'll let another student respond because it balances the power dynamic a bit. But if the kid says something racist, then don't, you know, it's like, don't rely on your Black students to check that. You check
Right.
it, because that's the moment where you are an ally. You are making sure that no labor is being having to be done. And so it's about how, so here's the thing, I guess I'm trying to say, there's not an exact science to this. There's kind of an art to it. And you get to that art by practice only, right? By digging in and really figuring out how to read a room. So what does that look like? Look, here's the best example I can give. I grew up, you know, my stepfather's a Baptist preacher. I grew up in a really religious community. I'm still a church girl. But, you know, a little more than a decade ago, I was like, a lot of this evangelical crap is terrible. This theology is, it's not working out for me. And so I didn't that day be like, fuck the church. I literally just, you know, because
I just
like,
learned something.
That's
Now
right.
it's over.
Now I see, right? No, like I just started reading books, like trying to figure out my big questions, and that was a years long process of like reading, assimilating that, and then as I learned little things, then in the right circumstance, I was being like, you know, I read this thing and it said X, so I'm thinking through that, right? Sometimes I would literally say to people, you know, I'm in process around that. I thought this way about it for a really long time, but now I'm like, you know, maybe I need to rethink this. It's okay for you to be in process. I even think it's okay for you to say, there's a thing going on here. Like, if you're afraid of stepping on the Black person's toes, just go ahead and say it to them. I don't want to step on your toes, but I want to be clear that I saw this thing. It feels racist. I'm not okay with it. And I need people to know that. Be awkward. Because what I keep telling people is what Black people care about is sincerity. What we don't want is performance. What we don't want to feel like is that when you step in to say something that it's all about your angst, your fears, your desire for perfection, your desire for cookies and adulation. But literally, if we see you being like, look, this is wrong. I'm committed to the notion that this is wrong and that on my watch, I'm not going to stand idly by. Then there's all kinds of ways that you can communicate that, right? And so, like, I give the example of Black women tell these stories about, you know, it's not just Black men where white ladies clutch, you know, Black people walk onto an elevator, white ladies start clutching their purses and stuff, right? What do you do if you're on an elevator and you see a white lady like clutch her purse because the Black man walked on? Or the Black woman walked on? What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Do you start yelling at that white lady about, how dare you? Because, I mean, nobody wants that. People are just trying to go to work, right? But what you could do is literally just make it a point to speak to the Black person, right? Hey, how's your day going? You know, craziness in the world. You know, that's the moment to do it, because it is a way to say, I saw that shit and that was crazy. It's a way to say to that white person, these are people and you are treating them like criminals, and that's insane. It's a way to diffuse by being like, I'm not threatened by these people. What is wrong with you? Right? That kind of thing. So it's learning the art of it. It's not a science, right? It's learning the art of not sacrificing Black people's dignity so that you can feel like you really stepped in and did something. But so often, even if a Black person, like when I've been dealing with racism on my job of late, sometimes I want the floor to say some things because I want to say, you know, but what I have appreciated from my white colleagues is sometimes they'll be like, you know, they'll get the floor and they'll be like, I want to affirm everything that Brittney said. I think that's absolutely right. Here's where I stand. And here's what I think we can do to address her concerns more effectively, right? So they amplify, they affirm, right? And then sometimes they beat me to the punch. So when it came time to write a statement about all the Black Lives Matter stuff, I didn't suggest that my department wrote a statement. One of my white women colleagues was like, hey, there's all this foolishness going on in the world, and I think that we should write a statement as a department. And then the white people got together and they wrote the statement. Those are out forms of allyship. Don't wait on a Black person to be like, well, are we going to write a statement, or we just going to act like nothing is happening? So it's not a science. It's an art. You will get better with practice, but you, just like every other thing in your life where you have to get okay with not being good at it at first, just be okay not being good at it, and trust that, look, and part of what it means to not be good at it is, so let's say that you are trying to be better and you fuck up and a Black person is like, I'm really offended. Like, you tried and you did not help. Then all you say is,
every white progressive liberal feminist woman's nightmare.
correct. Like, you did not help. Let me tell you what you did not do. And like, let's say a Black person is yelling at you. Look, sometimes we're yelling because you're the safest person in the room to yell at, right? Yeah. Sometimes the people who are actually trying are the people who get a lot of the shit. Any of us who works in movements knows that. My students are harder on the professors that try than the professors that they don't think are doing anything. So you've got to see that you might be getting more shit because folks are like, you ought to know better than this. You say you're down, right? Why aren't you whatever, right? So take a deep breath, right? Reject defensiveness. Try to look at what it is you're seeing. Is it anger? Is it hurt? Is it fear? Is it indignation? What is it? And just respond to that. I'm really sorry. You literally could say to the person, I'm really sorry that I didn't help. And my commitment to you is that I'm going to work to get better. That's huge. Like, that's all we want. Like,
that's huge.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that I fucked up. Don't cry.
And try this. Try this one.
Even when somebody's yelling at you and you want to cry.
Yep.
Just be like, I'm really sorry, and I'm going to work to get better.
Don't take it personally, even if it has your name on it. And and I would say, try this one too. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for the correction. Thank you for the correction. I didn't see that. Thank you for redirecting my attention so that now I understand that. I appreciate you taking the time to show me that. Thank you. Yeah. Like, that's a good one too. For any criticism, actually, it's that's the more highly evolved way to do it. I would also say to white women listening to this, I think it's really important for you to focus on how you're having these conversations when Black people are not around. How are you having these conversations with your white family members? What's happening at the dinner table? So much is about what's happening at the dinner table. And I was really struck in your IG Live thing 2 weeks ago when you were talking about that, and you were saying, look, you don't do me any favors when you come to me and say, hey, I want to tell you that I disowned half my family because they're all Trump voters. And so I should get a reward because I no longer talk to those assholes. And you were like, if you don't talk to those assholes, who's going to talk to those assholes? I don't have a seat at your table. This is where you're embedded, right? You're embedded with people. And I think that the assignment that you gave at the end of the Share Your Mic Now initiative to the white women who had followed you that day on my account was, I want to invite you, I want to challenge you to have, one conversation this week with another white woman about race, about anti-racism. And I liked that you expanded it to say, either talk to somebody who you feel like has not yet caught up with your level of wokeness, or talk to somebody who's far ahead of you and learn from them. But keep making sure that this conversation is available. I had no idea what you were going to give as your call to action. I knew that everybody in that project was going to offer a call to action. So I was sitting there as a good homework student, right? I was sitting there ready for you to say, like, join Stacey Abrams, Fair Fight Fund, or, make sure that you go to this rally or write this letter to your congressman. That's easy for me. What you might call armchair activism. But when you gave that assignment, I was like, oh shit, she's sending us to the belly of the beast, right? Like, this is the scary stuff. Like, can you talk to your uncle about this? Can you talk to, your neighbor about this? Can you not allow a comment to go by and think, oh man, that's uncomfortable. That makes me uncomfortable. But I'm just going to let that slide because I don't want to make the dinner table an uncomfortable place. But you also gave such good instruction on how to have those conversations in a way that doesn't make the other person more defensive. And I wanted to personally thank you for that instruction when you likened it to the way that you learned to talk to your relatives about LGBTQ stuff in a religious setting, where you were like, hey, you could soften it by being like, I used to see it that way, or I'm learning more about it myself. And it was just such, it's helped me already in having some conversations. And I would also say to the white women following this, go back in, right? So you go in once, you try it, you do it wrong, you get your feelings hurt, you feel afraid, you feel self-conscious, you feel awkward. Brush your knees off, put it into the perspective, once again, that we can't say enough, which is that your hurt feelings are not going to kill you, but actual Black human lives are on the line here in this matter. So be a little more brave. It's okay. And so for me, as somebody who's always been a non-confrontational person, I had a really interesting experience about it this week with a white male friend, who I was talking about the Share the Mic initiative and things that I'm doing, and he started to defend the police. And I don't think I'm not an arguer, so I'm not fast on my feet, right? So that's a thing that can happen too, is that you miss by the time you think of what to say, the moment has passed. But I invited him over for lunch, and I said, a couple days after, because I thought about it, and I know this guy's heart. I also know he has a lot of family members who are police officers. I know it's personal to him. And I brought it up again, and I just said, look, we started to have this conversation the other day, and I noticed that you had a reaction. I noticed that you felt, I could see that you got emotional, that you got defensive. And the first thing I want to tell you is, I hope I listened to you with respect. And if I didn't, now is your chance. Go ahead and tell me what it was that you were trying to tell me. And he did. And once he calmed down, then I said, can I tell you about what I've been learning? Can I tell you about the work that I've been doing? Can I tell you about the books that I've been reading? Can I tell you about the experiences that my Black friends report about their encounters with the police? And now we're in an actual conversation. I couldn't do it in the moment because I'm not quick enough, and also the defensiveness was already there. But I really heard you 2 weeks ago when you said, lay the groundwork in such a way that you can return to the conversation again later. So if you make it into a, black and white war, black and white probably wasn't the right term there, if you make it into a no holds barred, there's only, you're not going to be able to have that conversation again 6 months from now, where there might be a little bit more opening, a year from now. So I really want to thank you for the guidance that you gave, not just giving the challenge, but showing, modeling from your own experience. There's a way to do this where you can keep these conversations going. And those conversations, if you are not a person who has power in the corridors of politics, if you're not a massive corporation, what can you do in your own family, in your own dinner table, in your own neighborhood?
Yeah, all of this changes in conversation and relationship. And, part of the way that I learned that is because, the gay people in my life have been patient with me. They just have. I just was a classic church girl about all of it, and it was deeply offensive. And, I go back and cringe now at some of the things I thought, or things that I said, or ways that I made people feel. And what I had the benefit of people who just were loving to me and in relationship with me, even sometimes probably when I didn't deserve it. And it also made me, it was that. And it was also the fact that I was like, I'm committed to justice. And if I'm committed to justice, it can't just be for the experiences that I understand. It also has to be for experiences that I might not understand. And if I say that I'm like a lifelong student, then I'm going to keep learning. And look, part of what I'm trying to work on in my life is to make sure that I am a safe person for like trans people to be in relationship with me as a cisgender Black woman, right? Like that's because that was in some ways the last frontier, like just an experience I didn't know a lot about when I started in the professoriate, and the language was shifting. And so I'm working to make sure that I'm a good ally. And that means that sometimes we have to, this is the other thing, you don't have to have all the questions figured out, or you don't have to have all the answers to still be good at the politics of it, right? To still be good at but I'm going to stand on the side of justice and rightness. And when marginalized people tell me this thing is happening to them, I'm going to stand with them, even as I'm learning, even as I'm growing, because we can do the right thing even when we don't always understand all the contours of it on the front end. And So you don't, which is to say, you don't have, it's that quote, "We make the road by walking." It's that sort of thing,
Mm,
right?
mm.
And so, yeah.
Um, I have completely lost track of time, and I'm so afraid that I know that we only have an hour on this before Instagram cuts us off, and I don't want to get cut off in mid-sentence. So I'm thinking to wrap it up, but I wanted to wrap it up by thanking you again for the time that you've given for your work and for just your presence, just your existence. um, and I wanted to wrap up with this one line that you said. Everybody be patient with me. The collective orchestrated fury of Black women can move the whole world. Um, thank you for that. I hope that that's what's happening. Um, and I hope that it's, I guess my last question is, what do you think is happening? As you're watching this moment in history, what's your perspective on it? What are your hopes about it? What are your fears about it?
Yeah.
And yeah, over to you.
I mean, I try to take the long view, so that we're in a long freedom struggle, and this is a particularly great moment. Actually, I think that, I'm not shocked by Black people being in the streets. That's what we do to make things move. I've been shocked at white responsiveness, wanting more from it. But I think that, look, we're in a moment that feels like if we don't get it right, we could be in another civil war as a country. And I think white folks see that. And what I'm heartened by is that I see white people saying, many of them, not all, but a strong contingent saying, we actually don't want to go back to that. Like, we actually do want to continue with this freedom project and delving in. So I think that what Black people are doing is being the soul and conscience of the nation. We are always, sort of testifying to America, like, you could be great. It's like the Lizzo song, "Why Men Great Till They Gotta Be Great? Why America Great Till It's Gotta Be Great?" Right? It's really that kind of, you know what I mean? So
Right.
that's what Black people are sort of out saying, just reminding America about the promises that she has made and her stated creed. And look, I think that some things will change. I think that for all of the losses that we have in history, I think that anytime there's sustained protest in the streets, I think that we see institutions shift, and I think our history attests to both. It attests to the bloody battles we have to fight, and it also attests to those really glorious moments when we get it right. And our job is both to help push, and our job is also to then remain vigilant. And I do think we've remained vigilant through the Trump presidency, despite the onslaught of things that have kept us off kilter. And I think we're seeing the result of that collective vigilance and this clear sense from everyone who's in the streets and in this fight that if we push and if we hold on to each other and if we figure our shit out, right, that this thing can be saved in a different form, in a different way, a better version of America. Not the old version where white folks are on top, but this version where everybody gets a shot and everybody has the things they need to be sustained. And I'm saying that because I'm an optimist, right? I said in a different forum that hope is a risky project. And so when we see people in the streets literally risking their lives, I think that what they are shouting at us is, but we still have hope, right? We still have faith that a thing can be different. And I think that as long as you got hope that, that there's a good possibility that you will win. So I believe we will win.
I was going to ask you, I know you're a spiritual person. I was
Yeah.
going to ask you for a benediction, but I think you just gave it.
Oh, yeah. May we win.
There, from your mouth to God's ears and through our hands, may what you said become the world that we live in and the country that we live in. Dr. Brittney Cooper, I have the highest admiration for you and the greatest gratitude. I've loved every minute of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Liz.
for anybody who just tuned in a minute ago and don't know what we're talking about, it's not too late for you to read Eloquent Rage by Dr. Brittney Cooper. Yet she's got it too. We've all got our copies here. It's an important book, and it's an important book intellectually. It's an important book politically, and it's an extraordinarily beautiful book artistically. Thank you so much for your work in the world and for being here with us today. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in, and thank you all for your questions. And yeah, I have no intention of hashtag share the mic now being something that I did once. This is what we do now, period. And just thank you for initiating it with me. It's been a tremendous honor. And I'm
Right.
going to do my level best to save this. I know a lot of you have been asking to save the conversation. I'm going to try now. I'm going to sign off. Lots of love, and everybody be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.